everyone, it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be talking about some TikTok hyped reads and whether they live up to that hype or not. So I've done a couple of videos like this, but I have a whole new stack here to talk about that I'm excited to see if I think that they're worth the hype or not. But I just did some research because, I mean, I haven't been going on TikTok for the past couple of weeks because I've been so busy. But when I do post, I have a lot of fun with it and I go ham when I do post. So if you want to follow me, my TikTok is at Hailey in Bookland, and I'm hoping to get back to posting on there soon. But I still don't really get book recommendations on TikTok. I just get like book memes basically. So I did a little bit of research, saw what people were saying were hyped up on TikTok. Hopefully, I think most of these I have seen and like know that they're hyped up, but some of them might not be, I'm sorry. But this is the third time I'll be doing this video. I'll link the other 2 times I've done it down below. So I did one that was about like the heavy hitters there, and then I also did a video about TikTok hyped romances specifically, and I actually should include the Colleen Hoover books that I read for that Colleen Hoover reading vlog in here. I'll grab those in a second, but yeah, I have done a few like TikTok inspired videos, so I will link all of those in the description box down below because I think TikTok is fascinating, so I like talking about it a lot. But without further ado, let's just get into this list. Okay, so first up we have the very infamous It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I have seen this book everywhere. I'm pretty sure even if you aren't on BookTok, you probably have heard of this book or seen it, because this is kind of one of those cases, like BookTok's really interesting because I find that it brings books to the mainstream audience, if you will. Colleen Hoover has been popular for a while now, and I feel like she always has been very popular on the bookternet, but BookTok has really brought her to like, there's like fitness influencers and stuff that I follow that they're always posting about reading Colleen Hoover now, so she has made it outside of the book world and everyone is talking about her. And if it ends with, no, I always say that, It Ends With Us is her most popular book. And this one came out, I think in 2016 or something like that, but it seems like it just came out because it is absolutely everywhere. And my personal opinion is, I do think that this is worth the hype, but the hype is a little bit too high for me. I think it's worth the read, I should say, not necessarily worth the hype. I just went to pull down my shirt and I almost like literally completely pulled it down, but it's a crop top, so I was just pulling it down and I almost just flashed everyone. So what an interesting start to the video. I think that this is seen so often. This book is talked about absolutely everywhere. And for that reason, it's hard to go into this book not having sky high expectations. And when I read it, it was very different than what I was expecting. And I think that people are going to have very different opinions on how the subject matter is handled. This book deals with abuse, and I did not know about that at all until I was talking about reading it, and I was assuming it was just like a regular romance by her, but it's not. It is definitely not. And it's actually coming from personal experience of her mother who was abused. And it's dealing with domestic and spousal abuse is very interesting because it's something that I wasn't expecting to get from this book. And personally, I did think that the subject matter was handled very well, but I know that there are some people who haven't necessarily enjoyed it. So personally, I think if you are going to pick up any Colleen Hoover read, it is a good one because it does have some substance to it. I know a lot of people have said she's like the best writer ever, and I enjoy her writing. She uses a little bit too many cliches in her romances for my personal tastes, and I don't really like her characters' names. But like, remember, with all of these, I'm talking about my personal opinion, so don't be offended. So do I think it is worth the hype and lives up to the hype? Not necessarily, but I don't think it's a bad book. I don't think that it's not worth the read. I just think the hype for this one is so incredibly overwhelming that like kind of impossible to live up to. I was going to do all of the Colleen Hoover books in a row because I have 2 more to talk about, but I'll move on and then like I'll do every other one. So next is You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao. And this book, I'm not surprised that this book was hyped up on TikTok because it's very much like a TikTok read, if that makes sense. There's definitely a certain kind of book that seems to get really hyped hyped up on TikTok. And this one I really loved. I do think that this one is worth the hype. I think it lives up to it. I so enjoyed this. So this is about a girl who her boyfriend dies in a car accident and she is absolutely devastated. She's like in the process of grieving. At the beginning of this novel, it's just been his funeral and she didn't go to his funeral. And she ends up calling his voicemail to hear his voice one last time, but is surprised when he actually picks up. And they end up having this limited time together on the phone where she can finally say her goodbyes. It's heartbreaking and beautiful and everything that you would expect it to be. Like, the fact that this is a debut completely blows my mind because I think the writing is exceptional. I think it is such a beautiful, beautiful, incredible story. I fell in love with it, loved the characters. I could really feel what the characters were going through and it just hit me. Like, it hit me right in the feels. It definitely got me. I think it was really, really well done. And like, you know what's gonna happen. You know it's gonna be sad, but that didn't lessen the impact at all. And I think these characters were very young, and I'm not saying that you can't like find true love when you're young, but they were very young and they had this romance that was kind of a whirlwind. It was very intense and it was short, but it felt very believable for me, even though it kind of was insta-lovey. But I think that's because of their connection afterwards. Like, the chemistry between them was just phenomenal. So I loved this book. I think it depicted grief really well. The main character is kind of hard to root for because she really isolates herself in her grief and is hurting other people in the process, but that's just how she's dealing with that loss. And I found that to be very accurate because like everyone deals with grief in a different way. And this was a very interesting but accurate portrayal of that. I think it's one that you don't necessarily see very often. So I do think this one definitely lives up to the hype. So the next Colleen Hoover book that I read in that vlog is Confess. And this one, I don't know if this one is super hyped up on TikTok. I'm just talking about all Colleen Hoover books in any of these hyped up videos because as an author, she is everywhere on TikTok. So I feel like it does make sense. I think this one is a little bit less hyped up and I can understand why. It wasn't my favorite. I don't think this one is worth the hype if there is hype for it. I don't know, like this one was super, super corny. The beginning of it, I already was like, ugh, and then it never really went anywhere. It never really got better. So I thought that this one was going to be fun because it's about an artist and it just seemed like there's art in it, which I was like, ooh, cool. But it was just kind of, it was a little bit of a letdown. So yeah, not much to say about this one, to be honest. I read it, it happened, but there was nothing really special about it. Wasn't a huge fan. Next is Scythe by Neil Shusterman. I actually really haven't seen this book all that much on TikTok, but I believe I actually included this in a different Worth the Hype video where it wasn't just TikTok reads, but I'm really excited if this one has made its way to TikTok because I really enjoyed this one, so obviously I do think it's worth the hype. And it's different than what you would normally see hyped up on TikTok, or at least like the heavy hitters that I will see where like bookstores will be like, oh, TikTok hyped books. This isn't really what you would see. Usually you would see like the romancy reads. So it's kind of nice that this list has a few different reads here as well. So Scythe is super cool because it's a world where it's a utopia. There's no disease. No one dies naturally, but you have these scythes, which are essentially little like Grim Reaper people. They're just people, but they've been tasked with going around and gleaning people, which is killing them. It is like fascinating. It is such an interesting series, completely blew me away. I really loved this whole trilogy and I think it is 1000% worth the read. It will keep you on the edge of your seat and you will just be shocked. Neil Shusterman does a really good job of writing these books that will have that shock factor. Like, he is not afraid of writing about very unique and different topics and doing it in a way that will just make your jaw drop because it's just so casual and just like expertly done. And Scythe is a prime example of that. So this one, for sure worth the hype. And the last Colleen Hoover book that I have here is Verity. And Verity, I think, is worth the hype. I don't know if this one is once again as hyped up, but it definitely should be. I didn't know what to expect going into this one because this is a thriller by Colleen Hoover and I hadn't read any of those before. I'd only read her romance books and I ended up listening to the audiobook for this one, and some of those parts on audio was a very interesting experience. Like, it was weird. Her writing for this one was completely different than it is for her other books. I found that it wasn't cliche. Like, I know cliches are necessary and it doesn't bug me that but sometimes like her writing just becomes so cringe. It's almost like a caricature of itself. And with any romances, I don't like that, where it's just like, I don't really know how to describe it, but I found with this story, and probably because of the subject matter, it didn't have that. This just had like twists that I didn't see coming, and I was just fascinated while listening to this audiobook. I couldn't put it down. I kept on wanting to listen to it more and more because it was just absolutely wild. So I was so surprised by this, so blown away. It's still one that I'm thinking about, and it's definitely one that will leave you thinking afterwards. Oh my goodness, I just was not expecting this, so I think it is worth the hype for sure. This is another one, like, I think if you're gonna read any Colleen Hoover book, this is a great one to read because it showcases her adaptability, I guess, as a writer. Like, she can really write in anything, and all of her books are really just compulsively readable, and this one especially was. Next up is I'll Give You the Sun by Dandy Nelson. This book was really hyped up quite a while ago when it first released on BookTube, and there's another book by this author, The Sky is Everywhere, that was also really hyped up. I did not like The Sky is Everywhere, so I'm glad that this one is hyped up rather than that one. I think that I'll Give You the Sun is a great book. I read this a while ago and I did really enjoy it when I read it. It's a coming of age story about two twins and like their relationships. They used to be really close, now they've kind of fallen apart and they're coming together again, and it was just a very interesting, very character driven story. I feel like this one is a story that will stick with you because it spans such a wide time frame. Like, it's told from the perspective of both of the twins, but one of them is in present day and the other one is in their past. So you get a very well-rounded look at things, and it's a very emotional story about these siblings, and you definitely feel for them over the course of the story, and the writing is really, really great. So I think that this one is worth the hype. Next up is Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Ayamide. This is another book that I definitely think is worth the hype. I've talked about this book actually quite a bit recently because I think it's fantastic. It was so good, like kept me on the edge of my seat. Definitely a real page turner of a thriller, and it has a lot of commentary that is super interesting as well. So this is set in a boarding school and you're following two characters, and it's very much like Gossip Girl because these two characters have this like sort of like, I mean, kind of like Pretty Little Liars too, where it's like an A character is like leaving all these messages, leaking things about these characters, and nothing seems to connect them except the fact that the two of them are both Black students at this school. So you are seeing like where this is coming from, who's doing it, this research into it. It's just, I don't want to say too much about this book, honestly, because I think it's just one to go into and see where it leads you. It's definitely one that you don't really want to know too much about and want to just take a chance on, and you won't be disappointed. My jaw completely dropped while reading this book. I could not stop turning the pages, and by that I mean listening to it because I listened to the audiobook for this one as well, but it blew me away. This is another one that I can't believe is a debut, but I definitely will be needing to read more from this author because wow, totally worth the hype. Next is Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. This is another one that I'm not surprised that TikTok has gotten its hands on, and that's because this is an enemies to lovers sort of story. It definitely seems like, once again, one of the kind of romances that TikTok would really, really love, and I enjoyed this one a lot as well. I think it's worth the hype. It is, I mean, Trisha Levenseller is an author. She has books that are so easy to read, and I always fall in love with them, honestly. I've enjoyed all of her books that I've read so far. So Shadows Between Us is about a girl who has this plan. She is definitely very determined, and her plan is to woo the Shadow King, marry him, and then kill him to take his kingdom for herself. She wants to take his power. So it's a super interesting romance between the two of them because it deals with like a lot of tropes, like they can't touch, which is interesting, or like they can't touch in like a certain capacity of like will they, won't they, so much angst around it, but the characters are incredible and I had so much fun with this one. The romance is definitely the main driver for the story, but ooh, is so good. Like, it was steamy, it was really great. Next is Firekeepers Daughter by Angeline Booley. This is such an interesting one, and I'm really glad to see that it is hyped up on TikTok because it's another one that I wouldn't really expect to be, but it is a story about a murder mystery where the main character, she is of Ojibwe heritage, and it's all about her community. Community is definitely a main driver to the story, but there's something that's happening within their community, and she ends up working with the FBI to try and uncover there's this drug that has been killing people, and they're trying to find out what this drug is. So the main character is using her knowledge of traditional Ojibwe medicine to try and help them figure out what is going on. So there's a lot of mystery and intrigue to the story, but there's also so much culture and identity to it, and the main character like struggling with her identity, trying to figure out where she fits in and where her community fits in the greater world. It's just such a fascinating story. I thought it was extremely well done, and I'm so happy that this one is hyped up on TikTok because it definitely is worth the hype. And the final book that I wanted to talk about today is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This one has been hyped up for quite a while on TikTok, but for some reason I never included it in the first video that I did, so I thought I would talk about it today. Adam Silvera is an author that I've kind of had up and down feelings about his books, which makes me so sad because he's like such a nice human, but I haven't always clicked with his stories. I wasn't the hugest fan of More Happy Than Not, but They Both Die at the End I did actually really enjoy. So this is another book where like you know what's gonna happen. It literally tells you right away, but it still pulls you in and you feel for these characters and you're so sad. Like it's a heartbreaking story. So this is about a world where you learn, like you know when you're gonna die. You receive essentially a text message the day that you're going to die. So you know it's going to happen. You don't know how. You don't know, I can't remember if you know exactly when. I don't think you do, but you know it's going to happen. So you have to decide like how you're going to spend your last day, and there's all these different services. There's like social networks for people who have found out, and this is about two characters who found out it's their last day and end up joining together and spending their last day together. Heartbreaking, so sad, but like so beautiful, and definitely I think one of Adam Silvera's best. But History Is All You Left Me is my favorite book by him still. Hello, I'm filming another video right now, but I realized I totally forgot to mention one of like the #1 books for this video, which was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I forgot that this was like super hyped up on TikTok, and I had found that out after I read it. It's definitely not something I would generally go for because it is an adult book and I don't read all that many, although I'm kind of starting to read a little bit more, but it's like an adult fantasy, but I would say it's kind of a lower fantasy. I think this one is worth the hype, but it is kind of divided opinions, and I do understand why it's divided opinions because it's definitely a book that I think will mean a lot to a lot of people, but then other people might not mesh with it because it can be a little bit preachy at times, and that might not appeal to everyone. But personally for me, I think I read it at a really good time. Actually listened to it. I listened to the audiobook for this one as well. With my job, listening to audiobooks has just been a lifesaver for like helping me to actually get some reading done. But I think The Midnight Library was fantastic, and it's going to mean a lot to a lot of people who might struggle with anxiety or depression, and I identify as that very much so. So it is a book that meant a lot to me. I had forgotten to mention that, and then I was getting the pile for this video that I'm about to film, and I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I forgot that one. So it's fine. I remembered. Okay, so those are all of the TikTok hyped up books that I wanted to talk about today. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Please let me know if you have read any of these books, your personal thoughts on them, because I would love to know. And I will see you guys in another new video soon. Bye!